Welcome back to the No Bad Karma podcast. It's season 2023, episode 3. And today's episode is about living and loving intentionally and entitled Happiness is More Than Money, but Love Isn't All You Need. So, I've never had so much anxiety in prepping to record an episode. And I'm not exactly sure why. I think part of it is because it's about money, and that's something that gives us all anxiety. So I think maybe a little bit of it's that, and a little bit of it's that I'm talking about how it's playing a role in my life right now, and the inspiration for this podcast, which also has to do with love. And but more than anything, uh, when I sat down to do live in love intentionally, I didn't really realize, even though I was talking about it, that that's what I've been doing. And the other thing I want to touch on real quickly before I go on is I think another reason maybe I have a little anxiety about this episode is because I've had 1/3 of the listeners join in the last 3 months. And 1/3 of the episodes have been listened to of the listens in the last 3 months. But I've been at this 2 years, and this is only the third episode of this year. So those aren't just my friends, and I'm not out there promoting it beyond publishing the episodes, really. So I appreciate you, uh, and that brings me to the point I was just getting ready to make. So when I started this season, I had a list of about 10 things I've learned that I wanted to share with you. And when I got to the inspiration for today's episode, I kind of realized the things I had to do, the things on my list I had to do with money, were the not the point, not the point of this episode. I had a couple things about money, but it was more about, what you always hear, follow your passion, the money will come, things like that. But really, it's, happiness is more than money, but love isn't all you need. And that's a really important point. And that is, I don't know if that's something I learned from my experience, but maybe I learned more about. Uh, uh, I think I've always felt that, but maybe I have the proper perspective now. So, so when it comes to the series about living and loving intentionally, that's what I'm talking about here. It's a whole process, and one of them has to do with, like I said, about money. So let me get to the inspiration for today's episode, because I said it also had to do with love. And I very intentionally have been dating for a relationship, and in May of this year, I went out and was very clear about what I wanted and what I was looking for, and I met someone. So it turns out, you know, I have a main gig, she has a main gig, I have side gigs, she has side gigs. One of her side gigs is, I'll explain it as uh, a wellness website for women and services. I would say they're focused on on women thinking about a couple of the topics. So uh, uh, she is getting ready to do a series on abundance and puts out her initial post, and I read it, and I was blown away. And I was blown away for a couple reasons, because so I've been dating this person for about a month and a half, and close to 2 months, and i- here I read this article which talks about her past and her personal life, and I've learned things about her that I did not know. Now, some of them, yeah, maybe I suspected, uh, but, you know, I didn't know. And not that maybe I should have known them that far along in the relationship, but there were some things that maybe we talked about, but we didn't talk about the details, and there were the details in black and white. So I was kind of blown away by that, first of all. Uh, but then she was talking about a lot of specifics about money and the relationship with money, and some of the things she was going to cover and that she's done, in her series. And as soon as I read this thing, I texted her and I said, "I get it. I'm blown away. It's amazing because what it's what she was really saying." Well, so then we're talking about it, right? And she said, one of the things I'm really trying to say is," and I said, "Don't even say it because uh, it's coming through. What you're saying is when you talk about your relationship with money in her terms, the abundance that you feel, the joy that you feel comes back to you other places in life too. It changes your perspective. It's not just about the money, it's about life." And she wasn't even talking really about that detail in her post, and she was saying, "Yeah, I'm trying to, even though I, try to be feel good, so to speak, I'm paraphrasing here, I want people to realize that, yes, it's not just about love and happiness. You still need money, and you have to treat it properly." And I'm like, "Yes, I already have titled my podcast based on this, my next episode." And though I was taking it somewhere else, a little somewhere else, right? But but as I'm saying here, I'm trying to teach you a little bit what I learned. And if we go to my story just very quickly, because I don't want to go into the details necessarily as I have before, I said it took 3 years to destroy my life, 4 years to rebuild it. And rebuilding is really getting a chance to do it again, right? And in there was really, in those 7 years, one of those years was really just treading water, like smack dab in the middle. Uh, but if I focus on the money aspect of that, I've said before, I was dead broke, right? And, so it's not that I was thankful before and looked at money maybe even differently before, but I look at it differently. So, but forget that for a minute, because I was talking about how it translates to everything in life. But let's just talk about money and take it out of my story. Let's just talk about money in general, because one of the things you hear, if you go to, if you're a Christian, let's say, and you go to any denomination of a Christian church, and I know this exists in some other religions as well, and then we'll take religion out of it for a second, but in any of those services you go to, once at least once a year, they talk about money and tithing, right? And in that message, tithing is giving 10% of your income. And in that message, they always throw out a phrase, "We are stewards of God's money." You're like, "What the hell does that mean?" Right? All right. So put whatever you think about God aside. And that statement, "We are stewards of God's money," it's just meaning, like I said, we're just, so take God out of it, we're just stewards of money. That means we're just taking care of it. It's not really ours, right? So whose is it? Especially if we're taking God out of it, right? So let's talk about money. How did financial transactions start? People traded, bartered goods, right? Then eventually someone said, "We got to print it, but we got to prove it's worth something." So they backed it, like in our country, with gold. But since 1971, it's not backed by anything. It's called flat money. And most countries' money is flat money. They just print it and say it's worth something. So now think about the newest kind of money that's out there, cryptocurrency. Basically, someone said, this has money. These bits and bytes have money. There's a whole 60 Minutes episode on it. There's plenty of documentaries on it. Let's all drink the Kool-Aid and we're going to believe it. And it was. And it is. But it's kind of like today's money. We just say it exists and it is. So, are we stewards of God's money? The government's money? Electronic money? Some money somebody else made up? Doesn't matter. That's the point, though. It's just money. It's just something we're transacting. You can't rely on it for your happiness. What you need to know is, if you go back to what I talked about before, you need to know what it is you need to survive, right? And you don't want to be at the bottom before you figure that out. You want to know what's essential, and that defines how much money is essential. So you go back to my story or to someone else's story, uh, uh, who's lost everything, and you need to go out and buy something. So literally had nothing, needed to go buy a washer and dryer. Now, you think I'm going to save up and go finance for a washer and dryer when you're recovering? No. I need them. I'm going to a used appliance place or Facebook or somewhere else. There's actually free stores that give crap away. If I can get my life back on track this month, I'll actually have a website that'll tell you about places like that. That's part of how I try to live intentionally. But the point is, you get to a point where you need something, or a refrigerator or an oven. You're going to go out and try to get whatever you can. If you've got kids you got to take care of or whatever. And I know people out there through work I've done with my church that live without these things and exist without them and have kids they send to school. But back to money, it's a required thing. But what you really need to first is what you need to survive. And you need to understand what that is. And most people don't even understand that. But here's the thing that most people don't tell you about money. How you view money, your whole attitude about money, has a lot to do with how you value yourself. How do you view yourself? Do you think, if you're working in a job where you think you're overlooked and whatnot, I mean, are you asking yourself, are you looking at yourself, how do I value myself? What can I do to make this better? And are you dealing with it positively? Instead of just saying, well, I don't get paid enough money. You need to say, wait, this is what I'm worth. Am I doing it? And go get it. And if that company won't give it to you, then yes, go get it somewhere else. But if you're struggling and think you can do better, you probably can. I'm not saying it's easy, but it's really important about how you, it really comes down to how you value yourself, and taking a look at what you need. And then once you get what you need, then you start thinking about what you want. And then you start measuring the importance of what you want, thinking about how important it really is to get it. And really, you find what you need is really what you need. it changes everything, but it also changes how you view yourself, because when you want something for yourself, you ultimately want the best, be it your job or your partner in life, your relationship with your children or your parents. That's really what you want. You want it to be the best. So, how you value money has a lot to do with value yourself, because even though I just said we're just stewards of it, we're just accepting it and then dispersing it and whatnot, it, there's a finite supply. Doesn't mean you should hoard it. It means you need to be responsible with it. And sometimes what you think's coming in won't be what's coming in. And sometimes what you expect to go out becomes more than what you thought was going out. Things happen, and you have to deal with them and talk about them, or your life goes to shit. Your relationship will go to shit with your partner, right? So you can't get stressed out about it, but you have to treat it with respect, because don't you want to treat yourself with respect? Don't you want your partner to treat you with respect? Don't you want to treat your partner with respect? It goes all the way around. And it's not, like I said, just your romantic relationships. It applies to work. It applies to the people you go to school with, that you go have coffee with, right? So let me talk about how that comes back to you. Because what I did when my life blew up, and I think I mentioned this in an episode once, is I went back and I looked at basically 16 years of my married life when I was also in business for myself, and what happened. And I was really honest with myself, and I did it for multiple reasons. Well, I did it initially because I was trying to focus in on what type of clients and projects brought me good money. But then I also realized what ones I also started thinking about which ones I'd like to do. And basically I did what I did for clients. I did a little analysis of my own business. And as part of that, I looked at my income. And wouldn't you know, the 2 years where I made the best money were the years where I was A, faithful, not that those were the only 2 years, and B, really working hard at being a good person intentionally. Like I do it every day now. But it's kind of like, think of all those times in life where you're like, I'm going to go out and volunteer. And do you volunteer today? Or I'm going to go out and do this, or I'm going to do that. Now, I was being real about all that, but I was like working super hard in my business, working super hard with my clients, working super hard with my church, working super hard with my wife. And I had really good financial years. So there is something to be said for living your life intentionally and doing the right thing, even though I like to also always remind people it's not just about doing the right thing, it's also about not doing the wrong thing. Because just doing the right thing doesn't earn you points you can expend later. So it's not about whose money it is. It's about respecting what you're doing with it and everything, how you're everything about it, because it's about yourself. It's about respecting yourself and the other people in your life. So let me bring that home two ways. I just got screwed on, at the time I wrote this script, over $30,000. Now, a large portion of that was going to debt from my past. The other portion of that was going to stabilize my life and move it forward so I could finish some business things I wanted to do and launch a nonprofit that I wanted to, you know, that I want to start to help people. And I got screwed. Now, I can treat that situation a lot of ways. I could sit here and complain about it, but I'm not going to, because at the end of the day, that's how I view money now. It's just a thing. So I'm not going to let it stop what I'm doing in life. Does it create issues? Now do I have to go out and acquire another certain amount to cover, expenses that I expected to be able to cover with that? Absolutely. Yes, it does. It creates issues, but I'm not letting it change my life. And and I'm not saying that like it's a small amount to me. It's super significant. I was counting on it. I got screwed by somebody I never would have expected to screw me, and that happens. And here's the other thing. It's not over. I'll pursue it because I have legal ways to do it. So I'm going to do that, and it is what it is, and I'm not going to let it stress me out, because I've learned that happiness has a lot more to do, or a lot has happiness is a lot more than just money. Money's just a thing. It's a thing you need to keep moving forward. And the and the more good you're doing in your life, and the more good you're doing with it, the more it's going to come back to you. That's what it's about. So it's about knowing your worth and knowing your value. And then when you do that, that's how you love better. It's how you love better with your people at work. It's how you love better with your friends. It's how you love better. It's how you find love. It's how you have meaningful relationships. So love certainly can't be all you need, because you're you just can't go out and get love and expect it to provide for you. It won't. It won't. I mean, you have to think of the Beatles song, because the Beatles song is also right, because they're saying you can go out and do anything, and you can. But that lies in knowing your worth and your capabilities and what you want to do with yourself and your life. So I, I really wanted to sit here and give you some more examples, and about how it's translated to love for me. Uh, uh, but we'll save that for another conversation. And we'll save some examples of how that maybe translates back to you in an additional conversation. Because really, the only things that matter are the things that matter. And those are people and our relationships. And until you realize that those things mean more than money and will contribute to your happiness more than money. And you realize the value of money in your happiness versus those things. And you start treating money with the same respect that you want for yourself and how you want someone to treat you, then it will all come together for you. That's what it's about. It's part of living and loving intentionally. And it's part of doing it every day. And it's how you give your choices a purpose bigger than yourself. I'll see you soon.